toxicity, toxic lifestyle through the inability to forgive because of one, ignorance, and for two, emotional immaturities, lacking the emotional facilities to process certain things is one thing. But case in point, forgiveness. Forgiveness is an absolute must. And this is the reason I say that, because to hold on to unforgiveness, like the what I've done for several items throughout my entire life, holding on to resentments for years, thinking that if you hold enough hate to it, or like that, or stay mad at certain things or express that hate when certain things come up, that keeps you safe from it ever happening again. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's like it's got to be put in, whatever the betrayal was or whatever it was, the resentment, it's got to be put into some kind of proper context. And for me, what I found out is mainly, not forgiving myself and not bringing myself back into a self-reconciliation to where I was okay with me, to where I forgave me, and then I understood me, and my relationship with myself was actually better now than what it was than before. Self-reconciliation. So let's talk about the three kinds of forgiveness. There is three kinds, 3 years. The first one is exoneration type forgiveness. It's when an offender has sincerely apologized, taken responsibility, and made amends for the harm they caused. And it also requires that the offense wasn't that severe and definitely not repeated. That's one. And then forbearance. This is another one. This is when it starts getting real close to the line of unforgiveness. It's when an offense is minor or doesn't happen very much, and when the relationship is valuable and worth preserving. That means they stepped out of line and they crossed your boundaries, but they're willing to work on it and correct it, and you can tell they are, and it's real. And the relationship you built up was enough to where you know that it's worth working on and saving instead of just pulling the plug. And it does require that the forgiver sets some healthy boundaries and figures out where these boundaries were that were crossed, because that's what it was. So that's kind of, both parties were kind of guilty on that kind, so to speak. But anyways, this last one is the kicker. This is the jumping off place. This is where a lot of us really, really mess up. And this is where we wind up taking on, where we harm, or we contaminate every relationship that we have and minimize our ability to have meaningful relationships. And this can go on for years. And if it goes on unchecked, it can really, really toxify a person. And this is called release type forgiveness. This is when you basically been betrayed. It was obvious they did not care nothing about your well-being or your life even. And you know that you do not want to have that person in your life again, ever, for any reason. And it's obvious, and everyone could say, yeah, you don't let someone like that back in your life. But a person has got to forgive themselves, to be very careful not to fall into that hate trap of thinking, well, as long as I hate that offense, that it'll never happen again, and anything pertaining to that, just hate everything about it, and use hate and anger, the resentment, to keep them safe from that ever happening again. But that doesn't work. That doesn't work, because it's like we have to trust. And by doing that kind of habit, it diminishes our ability to trust, because we have to trust to make new relationships. We have to trust to take on new things in life. So to be stuck in that frame of mind, a lot of that to me, like on my behalf, when those things happen to me, stuck in unforgiveness and having resentments that go on for years, was the fact that most of it was on me, that I could not forgive myself. But I wasn't aware that I wasn't doing that, because I didn't forgive myself. Because deep down, I felt a fool, or I felt flabbergasted that I even let that happen to me. You see that? So that kind of hate, that kind of hate shield, it's kind of like a shield, using hate as the shield. Doesn't work. So anyways, in another element, not only the element of not forgiving myself and putting this stuff in proper context, and not having the emotional facilities to accept it as such, emotional immaturities, trying to process those things with emotions that were not mature. But anyways, this is what I've seen in myself. It's like forgiveness is letting go of any wanting to change what happened. Forgiveness is letting go of any need to change what happened. Forgiveness is letting go of any want and or need to get it made right somehow. Forgiveness is considering what happened as happened and accepting it as such, that it did happen. See, it's those things right there. The inability, it's like holding on to it as if holding on to it and not accepting it until it gets made right somehow, magically, by either the offender or some kind of magic bolt of lightning come from the sky or something. See, that's the trap. That's the trap. But it's like these kind of things, it's like they're like in the subconscious. They get stuck and they're in the mind. Because when those kind of betrayals or whatever, those unforgivenesses happen, the bases and the mindsets were already there to begin with. Before the betrayal. We'll just call them betrayals, because that's more of a broad spectrum, that just kind of covers all the bases on that. The unforgiveness and the self-reconciliation. And it can be something else too. That's like to stay in a relationship where let's say I was in a relationship. We're going to try to keep this generic and vague, and we'll use different names to protect the innocent or the guilty or whatever, however you want to call it. And let's say I was in a relationship a couple years or so, or a year, and let's say my partner crossed an extreme line, and I stayed with him. And of course, always bring that up periodically, and it never got reconciled, never got amended or made up to me, because I wouldn't let it be. Just use it as a club to hit him with every now and then. And say that went on for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and still stay together and never divorce. There's that kind too. It's like a chronic unforgiveness. It's a type of mental disorder. If there is a certain name for that in like clinical psychology or anything like that, or behavioral psychology, I don't know what it's called other than resentment. Not processing things out, not getting the forgiveness. But it's like just something as the offender, if they can make it up and prove that, like if it's a big ticket item, if they can correct it by making amends somehow, and stay consistent, like say if they did a major harm, it could take several years of consistently proving that they were truly sorry about it before it even becomes fully repaired. Some things can take forever. Some things can take years to repair, and some things maybe never. Some things maybe never. I don't like to think that way. I like to think there's some type of supernatural force with the spirit of the universe that helps with human forgiveness. Because to be stuck in unforgiveness is just unbelievably miserable as time increases. And for me, as far as I know, everyone that gets stuck that way always, pretty much always, has addictive personalities to cover up that stuff, to make their lives okay with stuff they're not okay with, because their life's not functionable. And yes, this is a very wide topic. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of, oh my God. I mean, I did write an 18-month study every single day of research and everything and anything about forgiveness and reconciliation, and the more I dug into it, the more it just started fanning out and fanning out. I mean, there's just the angles that it happens, the ways that it happens. It's just unbelievable, but the result is still the same. And what the result is a hardened heart, pretty much. The hardened heart. The hardened heart that's trying to protect itself, to where it's like trying to protect itself through this one betrayal or whatever, winds up protecting itself from everything else, because it's like what it does is like it's stuck on closed, shut down for business. And as that contaminates every little relationship of every kind, as the months go by, the years go by, the decades go by, and to address those things after so many years, it like literally damn near can kill a person. I mean, it's more, to me, it's more of a spiritual kind of thing. It really is. And I don't want to go off into that type of tangent. I like to try to keep things more in a scientific realm, to where we can, draw some diagrams and stuff, and, really, delve into it in that manner, because it feels safer. But the fact is there's things to it that we don't understand. Any good counselor or any good psychologist would tell you that stuff like this, our human understanding only goes to a certain depth. It only goes so far. And then after that, it's like it's up to God or a higher power or a spirit of the universe or whatever your religion may be, to try to get them, try to get that shell to break, to crack, that forms around the heart, so to speak. Close-minded, a person could put it that way, extremely close-minded. Yeah, it's pretty sad. And this can be found so much if you talk to homeless people that live on the street, that are just full-blown alcoholics, addicts and stuff, can't function. All of them have this one thing in common. Okay? Most of them. Well, let's put it that way. Most of them have this one thing in common. And yes, I've actually been a street person one time. I was homeless for 3 years at one point in my life, and it was pretty pathetic. But anyways, one thing they all have in common, they all have resentments. They all have betrayals. Most of them, you say, well, why don't you go live with your family? Or why don't you have your family? I don't have any family. And then the more you dig and the more you pry it out of them, you find out they do have family. But they have resentments against their family. So they would rather die on the street with drugs and alcohol because of the resentments. Ain't that trippy? It's like I have a couple of resentments, but it shuts off the function of the rest of the world or the rest of any relationships other than the homeless people out there, the dying. Because that's what it is, the dying. They go out there to die. Well, that's the end of the 15 minutes. Got to keep these videos at 15 minutes. That's just a little personal rule. I have these YouTube videos. So the CTA is, honestly ask yourself, do you have any places of unforgiveness where you're holding someone in contempt? As in using like hateful feelings towards that so that it doesn't happen again and not realizing that you're doing that? Because if you are, my God, figure it out quickly. Because if it wind up growing that way and it stays that way, you think it's swept under the carpet, you think a couple of months goes by, a year or two goes by, and it's gone in the past? No, it's not. It's still toxifying you. Still toxifies a person. So that's a huge thing to look out for in the human psyche. Unforgiveness. Unforgiveness. Don't let it happen. Do not let it happen at all cost. Figure out how to surmount it. Figure out how to reconcile it. Figure out how to reconcile yourself to yourself about what it is, whatever it is. Have a good one. See you in the funny papers.